Now, I read a part of the open letter that was written to the president by the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, and they say among other things that a forest reserve is not a mine in waiting. Forest reserves exist to protect biodiversity, ensure clean water, regulate climate, and preserve the balance of life. Authorizing mining in such areas defies both logic and the very purpose for which these reserves were created. They say the LI 2462 must be repealed in full because it is unconstitutional. The law gives power to the minister and president that properly belong to the Minerals Commission, violating clear constitutional boundaries. It is legally flawed. The minister who introduced this LI delegated powers he did not have. The president cannot legally be granted mining approval powers in forest reserves without Parliament's explicit direction and only on the advice of the Minerals Commission under Article 2692 of the Constitution. It will destroy our environment. They say Ghana already suffers from polluted rivers, degraded lands, and disappearing forests. Weak mining enforcement has left a trail of devastation. Allowing mining in forest reserves will only make this worse. It breaks international promises. Ghana has committed to global climate and biodiversity goals under the Paris Agreement, the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, and others. The LI moves us in the opposite direction. And finally, they say it puts future generations at risk. Forests store carbon, protect against floods and droughts, and provide food, water, and medicine. Once again, they are gone forever. Once gone, they are gone forever. And that's where they're now asking for the president to do three straight things. To issue a clear and binding policy that permanently bans all mining in forest reserves. Repeal the LI entirely without delay. And finally, for Ghanaians to speak up, stand up, and defend their natural heritage. Yes, Prof.
Yes, Samson. Good morning to you. Good morning to the co-panelist. Good morning to your viewers as well. It's this Galamsey issue, to borrow your term on Newsfile, continues to be quite a vexed matter. And every so often we have, particularly our two main political parties, put out ideas, solutions, ways in which they believe that you can deal with the Galamsey menace. Most of the time in opposition, their proposed ideas seem to be a lot more forceful than when they're in power. I know when you follow the conversations, they do recognize that there are also some quote-unquote political risk in dealing with Galamsey. But you don't have a choice but to deal with this, because ultimately the consequences of this issue will not discriminate by party colors. What I find instructive in all of this conversation is, and I wrote about this just before the 2024 election, as citizens kept increasing the pressure and more demands on ending Galamsey. One of the things I argued is that the demands of citizens were quite at odds with what the political parties in their manifestos were promising. Any careful analysis of the manifestos of the two main political parties in the lead up to 2024, you would notice that, in my opinion, there was a deliberate attempt not to create a picture of a heavy-handed approach to dealing with Galamsey. versus what citizens were clamoring for is, a more forceful, heavy-handed approach. If you look at all of the proposals, anywhere between government support for responsible artisanal small-scale mining, if you look at some of the ideas they shared around greater regulatory oversight, improved practices for artisanal small-scale mining, it was this conscious attempt not to create this impression that we are either going to ban it or we're going to be so heavy-handed, because nobody wanted to lose the politics of the issue. So until such time that our two main political parties, in my opinion, can forge and build some consensus around how you deal with the politics of it, you would get this constant trading of you're not doing anything, you're not doing anything. Now, on the question of the LI, if you look at President Mahama's update at the end of the 120-day social contract, I can understand what he put out that day, right? That it appears to me that what he saw in the LI was this perverse incentive that grants the president or the minister this power to issue licenses or grant permission for people to mine in forest reserve. So what he said on that 120 days is, amend the LI, remove that perverse incentive. But he didn't leave it there. He also said, now amend the Minerals and Mining Act 703 and ban any kind of mining in forest reserve. Put those two together and you get the removal of this idea of we can go into our forest reserves and mine. So I understood that and I can understand that if he puts those two together, he believes it addresses the issue, except that the politics of it does not allow him to take that approach of amending the LI and going to Act 703 to ban mining in forest, because what would constantly come up is you promised to totally repeal the LI, and you have no option but to repeal the LI, even though I believe that going the route that he's proposing can get at the twin problem that he's trying to address.
Have you seen signs of sincere commitment in getting rid of this?
I mean, you've seen some initiatives at trying to address this issue. What I say is that if for nothing at all, the president as candidate in 2024, his party put out some very specific things in terms of how they can fight Galamsey. If for nothing at all, just take all of those ideas. I categorize them into greater, there were things about greater regulatory oversight, improved practices, government support. If nothing at all, take those proposals from the manifesto and show that one after the other, you're trying to rule it out. Because after all, as a candidate, those are the ways that you promised you can fight Galamsey and fight it effectively. So if you want to show the public that commitment, in addition to the things that citizens are clamoring for, just start rolling out those policies. For me, that is what would show the Ghanaian people that the commitment to fight Galamsey was not just based on political expediency whilst in opposition, but really there is a true commitment to deal with it.
In 30 seconds, must the citizens reason with the government when it promises to revoke a particular law and now decides to amend it rather than revoke?
So as I have said, I believe that the way President Mahama on his 120 days said, amend and then also deal with the ban on forest mining reserve in the Mining and Minerals Act 703. For me, it's an approach that I am willing to reason with the government about. However, repeal is repeal. And since that is what you promised, citizens have every right to demand that that is what you do. And at some point, I think that is what the president would have.
So regardless, the citizens must not take any excuse for non-repeal, correct?
Correct.
Thank you very much. I'm coming to Shamima.